Good evening. It is Monday, the 31st of March, 2025. It is coming up to 8:30 p.m. UK time, 12:30 Pacific Standard Time, which is where my guest tonight is based. This is someone who I've known, I don't know, maybe like a couple of years, probably through Twitch initially, but it's been really amazing to see how, as a DJ, she's grown and how she's now getting some amazing gigs, which we'll talk about, including warming up for DJ Koco, of all people. Going to have a chat about musical influences, about 45s, about DJing. It's International Women's Month that today is the last day of. So without further ado, here she is, DJ Geenee.
Hi. Hey, everybody. Good to see you, Criztoz. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's great to have you on. And as I said, we said earlier, it's the last day of International Women's Month. So
Yes, got it in there just in time.
Yeah, exactly. We've had obviously a lot of men on this show because traditionally it's sort of mental health and men talking about stuff. We've also had a lot of women guests. It's great to get points of view from across the board and hear everything that everyone has to say. Before we get into more recent stuff, tell me who first got you into music. Was it like parents? Was it brothers, sisters, friends? Who was it who really got you into music to start with?
Definitely my dad, for sure. But it's interesting because we didn't grow up listening to traditional Mexican music at all. He was a big classical music guy, which I always kind of thought, I think was definitely different for Mexican men, not too many into classical music. I remember he was just such an audiophile also. So on top of it, he had the best turntable, like really expensive. I forgot, it was like some Japanese turntable or something. And then he had to have surround sound. Before you could buy a box that had 5 speakers in it, he made the whole surround sound by linking speakers together in the house. So he was just such a fan of music and audio. He would crank up like blast, like the way people blast rock music is how he would blast like Mozart and Beethoven and stuff, So that to me was always like, oh my gosh, like sometimes it was a little embarrassing, as a little kid, you're like, oh my God, this is so loud. It's music, I mean, I just fell in love with it actually, when you listen to classical music, when you're able to pick apart every instrument, and that goes so into other music. And whether you're listening to hip hop or whatever, when you hear like, oh, this little part in the song and all the layering that comes with music. So I think I just went off on a tangent, but yes, my dad. That was
Yeah. No, it's cool because it's interesting because obviously you can see how hearing the different instruments in the classical music probably helps you now when you're mixing to sort of
totally.
separate out songs and stuff. So it's interesting that it's, from a young age, it's still having an impact now.
Yeah, actually, freaking legendary DJ Revolution, who was also at the Coco show. And we got into a discussion about how if you grew up with parents that were musical and you had, music heavily in your house as a young child, then you're already so many steps ahead of people maybe who didn't when it comes to DJing or anything, because that knowledge is subconscious, even is such a tool that only over years of like listening and fine tuning like your tastes and whatever it is you're hearing, that now you have just so much back knowledge.
Definitely. And it's all in there somewhere because it's like if I hear something, I can usually tell if I've heard it before. Okay, so from listening to your dad's classical records, when did it come a time when you sort of found music that you had sought out or that you'd been introduced to by other people?
Well, I was kind of a little bit isolated. I mean, I had like a couple friends, but I wasn't like the kid playing outside, and I think my parents were a little overprotective maybe, so I didn't really go out that much. So I spent a lot of time just me and my own imagination and then my little brother. So for me, my musical taste came into be from like the mid to late 80s of just listening to the radio, so it was whatever pop station was on the radio. My dad had bought me a little turntable, like a Mickey Mouse turntable, and I had all these Disney records and stuff. So I was always really into records, playing records, listening to music. But I just remember at that point, it was like the mid to late 80s, and it was Madonna and all this freestyle and stuff like that was on the radio. And I was in love with it. I have such an affinity because the mid to late 80s was my first introduction to like popular music, and I fell in love.
It's amazing, isn't it, that music is still so popular now? There's like
Yeah.
80s parties, 80s raid trains, there's like 80s revivals. I think it's slowly moving into the 90s now, but it's incredible that music is still so popular?
Yeah, it's dated but timeless at the exact same time.
So you're hearing this on the radio. When does there come a point when you start perhaps buying records or music?
For me, it was cassette singles. I came up when the first things that we were buying was cassettes or cassette singles. So I remember asking the very first cassette that I ever bought that I heard on the radio and I just had to have it was Club Nouveau's Lean on Me. I had to have
Yeah.
it. So I had my mom go and buy me that tape and I listened to it over and over and a million times over again. Yeah, that was the first one. Again, that was like late 80s. It was cassettes at first, and then I started buying CDs and in high school. But I would say in the early 90s got really into house music. I was going to undergrounds and raves here in LA, and it was a golden era time, underground like electronic house music in LA, early 90s to mid 90s. It was like warehouses that were whatever used in the middle of nowhere, and you had to like get a guy to give you a map to the location, you know, that kind of thing, which was an amazing that I was able to experience that. So I was really into house music after that, and then I got into hip hop, also kind of like mid 90s, obviously like Golden Area, Tribe. So many amazing things were happening to music in that time. My coming of age in the early 90s, I was like, I mean, come on, the music was just so good.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I'm probably sort of about in the same sort of path, actually, because the same with the 80s and sort of moving into the 90s. But before I forget, obviously, most of those behind you are cassettes.
These are all cassettes. We took them out. They're not in there, but the sleeves are on the wall. And then we have 45s here. But yeah, these are all hip hop cassettes, actually. Both sides are hip hop cassettes. And then if you were to look, we have like a whole bunch of cassette singles. Neither my husband nor me ever got rid of anything. So then when we got married, it was just like two collections, and then we kept collecting. So
You never really stop collecting, do you? That's the
no.
that's the problem. Once you start, and I guess some of those cassette singles, like you say, are ones that you would have bought back in the
Oh, yeah.
80s.
I'm looking at them now. It's like, you know, Belle Biv DeVoe, Poison, In Too Deep, Back to the Hotel. My Club Nouveau tape is over there too.
But again, it's like a piece of history, isn't it? You bought something. It's very different to like now where you download or stream a song. You know, you've got that piece of history that you bought that, and that is
Oh,
with you.
yeah. That's what's so special. That's sad about the digital era is that music was such like a journey, you know, whether it was getting money from your parents as a kid or later on spending your own money and because you loved a song or an artist so much. And it wasn't $1. I mean, the cassette singles, I guess, you know, were like $2 or whatever, but still you had to go to the store to buy it. So it's an effort that was made to find your album, go and buy it and then play it, rewind it, you know. It's there was an effort over your love of music. It's so much easier now.
Yeah. So obviously you start with cassettes and then obviously CDs. When did you start sort of getting into collecting records?
That was not until like my mid 20s because at that point I was just such a fan, always a fan of DJs. Like without even really knowing why. I had some friends of my family, twins, who when I was 14, they were 21 and they were DJing at like raves and stuff. And of course, when there was house parties, they'd be DJing and I was just like mesmerized, you know, like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like they're picking the music and they're setting the vibe and subconsciously I just loved it. And then when I started going to raves, it was like Doc Martin and Steve Loria and these legendary house DJs and just how they could command a room, you know, including myself, you know, I was just hooked dancing the whole night. So I always had an affinity toward that. And then finally, but there wasn't that many women doing it. You know, there was like a DJ Irene, who's legendary here in LA, house music or techno like DJ. But other than her, that's it. Like I can't even remember hearing about another DJ here in LA that was a woman that was killing it like that. And so then in my mid 20s, I decided I'm going to go for it. So I bought turntables and I started collecting wax because that was like a few years before Serato. So I was trying to blend, but then life happened and my husband and I had a baby. And once I became a mom, it was like, okay, my passions, my things are set to the side and I'm raising my baby and my babies because then I had more. And so once they got into middle school, that's when, I was like, oh, I kind of have my freedom back a little now. So what do I want to do with my time? And my husband is the one who, suggested that I pick that back up again.
Amazing. Amazing. And obviously, yeah, I was going to say the rest is history, which we'll get to. What sort of music were you then starting to collect at that stage? Obviously, having sort of rekindled your love of sort of DJing.
Yeah, definitely hip hop, like Tribe and neo soul, because that was like really big during that time too. Yeah, artists Erykah Badu or like Roots, stuff. Actually, they were like a little bit later on. At that time, it was like, what was I buying? Yeah, like Mary J. Blige or Faith Evans. Yeah, a lot of Biggie, Tribe. I was always more of a Biggie fan. I was a fan of just East Coast hip hop in general, up until the point that Dr. Dre came with the Chronic. But prior to that, I was definitely like all East Coast hip hop. I mean, I don't know, NWA. Obviously, I recognize him for being iconic, but at being a woman and that time, that didn't speak to me. You know what I mean? So, and Tupac either. There was something about like I think the production of East Coast music and it having like jazz or funk influences. And so then when Dre basically did that and did it for the West Coast, and it was like, yeah, it's the sound, I guess, that I like.
Do you then sort of move into sort of getting out and DJing out and getting gigs, or again, does that come a little bit later?
When I tried to learn on my own before I got married, had kids, I didn't get good enough to where I thought I could gig anywhere for sure. So I didn't. Once I decided to pick it up again, so this would be in 2018. 2018 is when I went to the Beat Junkie Institute of Sound, and that literally changed my life. My husband and I went on many dates, many outings to see the Beat Junkies perform. We are such fans. And so then when they opened up a school, it's like, of course, like, oh my God, I'm going to learn from the Beat Junkies. That's crazy, And so, yeah, Melody and Rhetmatic were my teachers. I mean, every day was kind of surreal. Like if we're a fan as much as me and a couple of my other classmates were, or all of them were really, it was like, wow, man, what an honor. I went and it was a year-long program and we ended up graduating. Oh, wait, did I say 2018? Because we started in 2019 and then March, I believe it was 8th of 2020 was our graduation from the Beat Junkie School. So we were so excited. We had just spent a year learning. We're like, we know what we're doing now. We're like, yes, we're going to go out there in the world. And so March 8th, our graduation, then next week, the whole world shuts down. So
yeah,
we're like, wah, wah. Okay, well, I guess we're definitely not gigging anytime soon. So, but then that's how Twitch came to be. That's how this, and I got to give definitely all the credit to my husband. Once we did the world shut down, he was the first one to jump on Instagram Live and was going live like so many other DJs. I mean, that was a whole other, there should be a documentary about that time in watching DJs on Instagram Live or Twitch during the pandemic when nobody was going anywhere. You know what I mean? It was so like crazy that everybody was doing the same thing, watching DJs all over the world on Twitch. He did that. And then we just started doing it together. And at first I was nervous and I didn't want to do it because even though I just graduated, I still was like unsure. Oh, because then I just really focused on the vinyl. So I was unsure. He definitely encouraged me and pushed me. And I have to say, if it had not been for the time on Twitch, like I wouldn't have gotten as good, I think, in that amount of time. Like it was being on Twitch every day.
Lots to talk about through all of that. Beat Junkies. So tell us what that was like. Obviously your idols of yours are teaching you, but what sort of stuff are they teaching you, and over and above sort of techniques, are they giving tips about the industry and gigging and things like that?
Not so much that. It was really just learning like the fundamentals. So basically the first 6 months are all vinyl. So, they're purists. It's where they came from. And if you're going to be a real DJ, like to the Beat Junkie standard, you have to know how to spin on vinyl. So, and beat match by ear and all that stuff. So we did that for 6 months. And it was really what they got down, because people would ask all the time, well, why don't you just have your husband teach you? Like, he's amazing. And he is, but he's also self-taught. So sometimes if you're self-taught, you don't remember what the first step was or the first 5 steps were to you learning, because now you're just here, and they have figured out a way to really break it down like a building block. It was like the first step, got the first step, second step, and so every time they layered on more difficulty. And so it was a really like gradual, great way to learn. And then the last 3 months is when we shifted over to Serato. And so then it was learning to mix on Serato, which obviously once you learned on vinyl, the Serato was much easier, and so we got to be more creative and stuff. And yeah, so obviously it was beat matching and scratching, which was really intense. And I have to admit, I didn't pick up on that part as much because I enjoyed watching turntablists, but I myself never envisioned myself being a turntablist. I wanted to be just like a DJ that rocked a party. And not that they don't, but you know what I mean? Just like seamless mixes and,
Okay, so obviously you graduated from that and you've explained that you guys were ready to sort of, let's get out into the world, let's sort of gig. But then obviously suddenly the world locked down. So what was going through your head at that point? I mean, did you think that, you've wasted this time, or how are you going to get through it? How was your mental health in that aspect?
I guess maybe mine was kind of the opposite, I feel like, than a lot of people, because I am naturally, I guess, because of the way I grew up, I was used to having like alone time and entertaining myself, with whatever thing I wanted to do. When the shutdown happened, I mean, my husband and I kind of reacted a little bit opposite, because he's such an extrovert that like taking all that away was like devastating. Where for me, I'm more of an introvert. So this was like paradise, like, yes, let's just do all of our home projects and we'll organize our studio, which that's another benefit of the pandemic is all of this was like BPM'd, organized by genre. We got all the stuff out that we didn't want anymore. Like, so yeah, all that downtime definitely did that too. But so I actually was in a good place. I was bummed about, not being able to gig, but I definitely never thought it was wasted time. At that point, I don't think anybody really knew how long it was going to be. So we were just like, well, hopefully it's not too long, but we didn't know it was going to be a year.
No one sort of knew what was going to sort of happen at that stage. So obviously you talked about Instagram Live and then sort of moving on to Twitch through Hydro. Who was it who introduced him and or you to Twitch itself?
Because there were quite a few DJs that were going on live on Instagram, but obviously because of copyright issues, it got to the point. At first, they were letting it fly. I don't think because they realized like what was happening. But then, when D Nice has 300,000 people watching his Instagram live, all of a sudden, it kind of put a lot of eyes on it, I think. And so then as soon as you start playing like 3 or 4 songs, boom, it shuts you off. So then I think at that point, I'm not sure exactly who, but somebody had mentioned to him about Twitch or he figured it out, like, where is everybody going? And that was the big thing is they don't shut you down. You could play for however long. And, that was the draw. We didn't know it was like a gaming app primarily. The TJs just came and invaded it.
We just found somewhere that we could all create our own space and our own little communities, and obviously then link with other communities. Because I think that's the other thing. It's not when we link across on Twitch, you're not just linking with the streamer, whoever it is. You're sort of linking with their communities, and especially if you collaborate and get them on raid trains and all of this, So it's a lot of people and a lot of energy that we're sort of spreading around. Yeah, Twitch has been amazing.
It is. It's wild. Like we kind of pinch ourselves all the time. Like, the fact that we've been able to go to Europe and be with friends, like real friends, because we've built this community online that like we know each other, like, and so then when we meet in person, it just solidifies that, that already like primary bond that you have with somebody, and then you meet them in real life, and that we can go like, having Mark or Jim come to LA and us go over there, and anybody that comes in, it's like through the Twitch community, it's like you're instantly friends, which is so wild. Like, when would that be that you just had friends all over the world?
If we hadn't all found ourselves on Twitch, and say the pandemic had been much shorter, say it'd been a few weeks and then everyone back to normal, I don't think things would have been happening in the same way. You probably wouldn't be quite so connected with people like, Mark Hype and like Jim and
totally.
like you say, Robert Smith's just come through as well,
I mean, it's wild. That's why for me, feels almost a little taboo to say that I enjoyed that and so much good came out of that, because so much bad also came out of that, the pandemic. But for me personally, so many good memories were made during that time of the pandemic, collection of friends around the world that, are dear to me now, and the alone time I got to spend in here. And because of that, we were able to create a Twitch stream and be able to gig because we took the time to organize our collection. And so again, so many good things came out of it, but I am sensitive to those who it had the opposite effect.
Yeah, and a lot of tragedy happened from pandemic, but it's good that obviously there's a lot of positivity and creativity that's also come out of it. It's something that we're always going to sort of look back on and think, what were we doing at that time? Obviously, we talked about it being International Women's Month. As a woman, especially in the music industry and DJing, how important is it to sort of continue to spotlight and make sure there's space for women DJs to get involved?
I do have like some really amazing female DJ friends, so I feel like I know a lot, but in general, overall, like when people say I am gigging somewhere and somebody comes up to me and they're like, women that come up to me will say, oh my God, like I love that, you're a woman and you're rocking and and then I remember it's like overall, even though I can name a ton of female DJs because they're all my friends, but like in generally, when people don't see that still, that it actually isn't that common, so it feels special. Like, oh, I'm glad, that I can inspire someone think they're too old or because they're a woman or because they're a mom or, all those things that you can still pursue your passions and do you.
Now, I think the other thing you sort of mentioned is obviously DJing on Twitch perhaps helped you to get to where you are now in terms of skills and sort of getting the gigs. So it's effectively like what they say, isn't it? 10,000 hours of practice of everything. Do you think that's something that we've all now had on Twitch and that's helped?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when my husband, he had a residency at Dave and Buster's in Hollywood, and he was there for almost 6 years. So that means he was DJing 3 hours every single Saturday. I mean, he was already a good DJ, but then at the end of those 6 years, when the pandemic happened, I'm like, oh my God, like he had even improved that much more. I was like, at the caliber of any of these DJs that are, big names, without a doubt. And that had especially sharpened his sword more so from that residency. And the same thing with Twitch. I remember when I first started Twitch, I just graduated, and here I am trying to spin records and vinyl, and I was nervous, and then I literally, this may sound weird, but I literally remember when like the click happened. I was like midstream, I was in a vibe, and then all of a sudden I had like mixed a few records together, and I realized I was like, oh, this is getting easier. Oh my God, like I'm not so nervous anymore.
From there, obviously you're not so nervous, but did that come also from the community and the chat and people sort of being there and supporting you? Do you think that helped?
Yeah, like that's another thing is what Twitch is a lot is sometimes what we're lacking in the real world, and it is that like 100% positive community. I mean, literally, if anybody comes with anything that isn't 100% positive, it's like blocked. So it's this 100% positive, supportive community that like, actually not everybody has in real life. That outwardly vocal about supporting and stuff, which I feel like I'm fortunate, I have like good friends that do in real life, but to have that all the time, like on Twitch is really cool.
Yeah, and it's again amazing that we can just switch on, stream. You know that your community is going to be there. You're going to see friends, and it's both ways, though, isn't it? They're helpful for you, but you're helpful for them, for viewers and the community, because for some people they can't get out, maybe they're housebound, or some people can't go to gigs, or they've got big families, so they can't go out. So we're also providing that community space for them to hang out, aren't we?
That's amazing. You know what? Like I didn't really think about that part before, I mean, I think about people watching because I watch and I know the enjoyment that brings me, but like that you're right. Like actually hadn't even dawned on me that there are a lot of people that maybe watch Twitch because they are for whatever reason unable to have a community or leave or whatever it is. That what amazing thing to be a part of.
And I think also we are, I'm not going to ask your age, but obviously we are a slightly older
Uh-huh.
generations.
Yeah.
Slightly older
Well, I think
generations.
I already dated myself saying that I was coming of age in the late 80s, so
Yeah. We're probably close to the same age.
yeah,
But also it's these are communities that we built up, regardless of, where it takes you in terms of gigs, in terms of that these are friendships I think are going to last probably to the end of our days. I mean,
for
unless
sure.
anything drastic happens, we're still going
No.
to probably be popping up on Twitch and streaming
Why
20,
not?
30 years, maybe, if we're lucky. You know,
I
who
know,
knows?
because there aren't gatekeepers on Twitch. It's like it's a place where you're going to find people being authentic. And that's intriguing. And you want to see people being authentic because it encourages you to be authentic on Twitch and in your real life. In my age, I've started to realize that true happiness comes from being 100% authentic
Yeah.
and not worried about what everybody else thinks.
Yeah. You're just going to do you, follow your path, your journey, whatever makes you happy, and obviously bring along with you the people who are there, who support you, what you're doing, and want to be part of your journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
45s. We haven't asked you yet. Why do you love 45s?
I mean, originally I was collecting 12s, albums and stuff. Since we got married, we were collecting records. I guess I always knew that someday I was going to learn to DJ. And when I did, I wanted to DJ the way I saw like my DJ heroes DJ, which was on vinyl. The 45s really came about because we decided we wanted to buy a jukebox. We just wanted that to be the centerpiece of our living room and to play it. And we just decided that's what we wanted. So we saved up and we looked around and we found this gorgeous Rockola model 1454. The guy, when he sold it to us, it was a record store. He's like, okay, well, included with your purchase, you can pick 60 45s to put in the jukebox. So we're
Awesome.
like, cool. So we're going through all of his 45s, picking 60 of them because it held 60. And so then that's when it really clicked. And so this was in like 2014 or so. Then we're like, oh, well, we can put anything in here. So let's start buying 45s, to put in our jukebox. So we were doing that. It was primarily to put in the jukebox. Then in 2018, my husband was on tour with Merce. And when he was on tour, Mark Hype was the support DJ. He saw Mark just going off on these hip hop 45s, and my husband's mind was blown. He was like, he called me like immediately after the show. It was like, babe, this guy, Mark Hype, I just saw him just tearing it up on hip hop 45s. Like, when I get home, like, we're just going to get 45s. That's all we're buying now, 45s. I was like, okay, cool. So then basically, instead of going to the record store and digging through the 12s, we just like shifted, started buying only 45s from 2018 on. And then obviously, then you realize like, ooh, it's actually even a little harder. So there's that little challenge, of them being so, you have to have finesse, and there's a certain touch to them, you can't be so heavy handed. And so, yeah, it was challenging and it was fun. And then obviously, like, you can bring 3 hours in a box this big instead of these ridiculously heavy crates that I wasn't really interested in carrying.
Yeah, as Nicky Name SD says, sevens travel better.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you've mentioned him seeing Mark Hype, and this would have been, I think you said 2018.
Yeah.
Is it weird thinking back to that point and then realizing that Mark's obviously been out, I think twice, hasn't he, to see you guys? Is it weird that has happened sort of like 4 or 5 years later?
You know what? It's funny is obviously because of the 45s, prior to him going out or seeing him, like, he kind of was already on our radar. And so, when you start to see who likes your Instagram posts and following each other. And so then when we did go out to see him, he went out to see him. Oh, and then we went out again. My husband was on tour with Pigeon John this time. And so then we called him when we were in Berlin. And at that point, we had just really been, I mean, he was a support DJ back then. They met. And then we were like little Instagram friends. And then when we went back to Berlin and we hit him up, invited him to the Pigeon John show, he couldn't make it because he was doing a stream. Then afterwards we met up and it was just like we instantly clicked. So he's definitely like our big brother. I mean, we left there when we both were like, wow, like that felt like we've known him forever, that when we just really met for the first time. But that's how instant the connection was. So
he's such a cool guy. Yeah, I met him last
super.
year in Hamburg, and hopefully going to be meeting again this year. So 45s, obviously, you buy them for the jukebox. You then obviously realize that they're fun to play with. But, as a format, they're still popular. You still love them, and they're still a big part of your DJing career, though, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely when we switched, then, we started getting more linked in with other 45 collectors in LA, that really, that was their thing. And so then now we're in like the niche of a niche and knowing all these people that are into this specific thing. And yeah, it's fun because they are, I don't want to say more rare. I mean, it's a lot of cases, like a lot of songs that you would want that maybe are plentiful on 12s aren't so much on 7s. So it's a little, yeah, I guess maybe a little more rare in a lot of cases. They're fun. It's a little competitive, I would say.
With the two of you, or
No, no, no. I'm just saying in general, like when you hear in a healthy competitive, like obviously whenever you hear somebody and they have like this record, you're like, wow.
during the first early years of Twitch, you'd just sit there and listen to all these records, and you'd just be like, "I need that, I need that, I need that," and you'd
Yes.
buy it. Now I'm a bit more particular now, but yeah, but it's
Right.
also a little bit of, like you said, it's healthy competition, and especially when you have
Oh,
meetups and
yeah.
things like that, it's like who can bring the coolest record, the
Yeah.
funkiest record, the best record, or the
Yeah.
weirdest record,
It's kind of like a sport like that, where you're putting together like your best set, your best record, and other people are doing the same. But it's a nice, healthy competition because then when you do recognize, like, man, wherever you found these, it's the hunt. There's so many elements to it.
Talking of the hunt, then, so obviously, are you spending time in record shops and online, or just online, or just in record shops? What's your sort of buying processes?
Both. If we're ever in a new city, the first thing we're looking is there a record store in this city, and we should go. Every city, wherever we go. Or if we have downtime, we're on a road trip. We're like, oh, is there a record store around here? So definitely record store is number one. But then obviously when we already know, like, oh, heard this record, I have to have it right now. Then I'll go out and Discogs. But generally, I don't really hunt on Discogs. I tried to do that one time, but I was just like, this is too much. I don't really do that. I'd go Discogs for specific wants, and then just like to dig and out in the wild. That's more fun.
Yeah, because you just never know what you're going to find. You just never know what's in that
Yeah,
record shop that's probably
right.
not on their online store, that may have just gone out that day, or someone's just dropped a collection in you. There's all sorts of things like that.
Oh yeah, totally. And
Uh,
now that we have so many, that we've collected so many, now it's like sometimes, you can go to a record store and say, oh, okay, like this is like general, like I feel like I have most of these. But then when you stumble across that record store where they have a lot of stuff that's like not as popular, like, oh wow, I found something.
yeah, definitely the hunt. Okay, let's talk about. I think I can see a photo behind you, poster for DJ
Oh yeah.
Koco and Shortkut. I mean, I saw
Oh,
that announced, and then I think it was like maybe the next day I saw announced that you guys were warming up. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, and tell us about the gig.
well, I mean, this was crazy, I have to say. The person who puts on this show, his name is Assad, and it's Footlong Development. And that's the production company. Retmatic, who was my teacher I had mentioned, he does a yearly party called the Wedding Mixer, where it's basically like you think of wedding reception vibes. So it's all like just dance, feel good music of like different genres and stuff. And he's in a tux, and everybody's supposed to be like dressed up. So he does that every year. And so I was his support DJ for that. And that's how I met Assad, who is the Footlong Development, because he puts on that show as well. He's a record guy, so he knows that we were into 45s, and he's watched us spin on Twitch and stuff. He called me and, he asked what I was doing on that day. And, I said I was free. And he said he really wanted female representation. He said he would love to have me on. And he said he would love also if my husband would oblige if he would come on also. And either we could do back and forth or just both of us spin. But he definitely female representation and not just all guys. So then I was like, of course. I mean, this was crazy. Like, so for those of you who don't know, Shortkut, so he's on Twitch also, heavy presence on Twitch, a legendary Bay Area San Francisco DJ. Last year in July, I'm not sure, but I think it's one of the biggest shows that he ever did, which was at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. It was like 18,000 people for the Roots picnic, and he rocked that with Retmatic. And I mean, we were like, wow. I mean, that was a big, big show. Well, the very next day, he had a stroke. And so it was devastating. I mean, but the community rallied and they raised a ton of money for him on his GoFundMe so that he could recover. And so this was his first LA show since the Hollywood Bowl show, where the next day, he had a stroke. So this was like an emotional comeback, for so many fans. I mean, people from San Francisco came down to LA. A lot of people from San Francisco, from all over the place, came to LA to see this. And so the club held about like 700 people. And then on top of Shortkut's return, then you had Koco, who, if you follow him on Instagram and you see, like, he's a beast, I mean, he's crazy what he does with the 45s. Incredible. So yeah, we knew it was like going to be a big show, but then, as the days approached and it was selling out, it sold out before the show. So we're like, wow, this is going to be really exciting. And it truly, truly was. I mean, the energy was magical. Everybody was super supportive and it was great. And Shortkut killed it, which was also very inspiring to see how much of a comeback he made, because he was like partly paralyzed. And so, like, man, he's over here tearing up 45s, like better than a lot of 45 DJs, So, and after, he's like still recovering, and Koco put on a show. I mean, this guy went like an hour and a half, 2 hours, I think. He went like all those intricate IG mixes that he does. Imagine all of them linked together flawlessly for 2 hours. Like, that's what he did basically.
Yeah, he's incredible. I've seen him in Bristol and London, and I'm actually seeing him in the Jazz Cafe in London in about 3 weeks' time. But
the Jazz Cafe, that's gonna be cool.
Yeah, he played last year. He went last year actually.
I wonder if he's gonna have a support for that show.
They haven't announced this year. Last year it was Mr. Thing. Haven't announced it yet, I don't think.
Yeah,
but
Mr. Thing's pretty beast.
Yeah, Mr. Thing's incredible, incredible. Right, again, lots that comes out of that. You mentioned that, I think it was Assad. Is that the name?
Yeah.
He saw you on Twitch. So obviously, coming back to Twitch, the fact that you're broadcasting and people can switch on, and I know this from experience. Like Sam Tweaks, one of my good friends, he's been booked to play in Edinburgh, I think, in a couple of days' time, off the back of someone seeing him on Twitch and liking what he does and all of that. So it's obviously still a good thing for you, practicing, and obviously community and building that, but also it's a good like shop front, isn't it, to show people this is what I do as a DJ. Do you think it's having that effect as well?
Absolutely, yeah, because otherwise, I mean, if you're just gigging in real life, it's like not everybody can come to everything, but when you can be anywhere and just see it on your phone. And maybe he saw it a long time ago, and then he did see me when I did the thing with Redmatic too, but that was just on Serato. But obviously I think seeing me on Twitch and knowing that I could do this, at least at the caliber where I would be like a suitable opener for these greats, that was like, so I was really honored. Like, wow. Still, it's still buzzing a little bit, like, because I feel like gotten my skills up to this point and I still have so far to go, but just to be recognized as I was talking to my husband, going back to mental health and just not being so critical of yourself, and just like accepting, being okay to accept love and things like that, rather than like shutting it down or like, and internally thinking like, I don't deserve that, or like people are very critical, can be very critical of themselves, and I think I'm trying to overcome that and accept the love.
Obviously, you've talked a lot about DJ Hydro, who's your husband, and obviously you DJ together and you DJ together at that event. Did that end up being like a back-to-back, or did you have a little bit of a set each? How did that go?
It ended up being a set each, only because the way Koco wanted his DJ setup and the way Shortkut wanted his DJ setup, like the mixers and turntables and such, was so specific that it was kind of outside of what we would have felt comfortable with. So we instead just did a set each, which ended up, I think, being also great because, as well as we mix together, like individually, we're just such unique individual DJs too. So I'm glad that we got to showcase that.
Fantastic. And obviously, you said learning all the time. So I guess there's a lot of inspiration from what Shortkut and Koco were doing. Is that something you've taken away and you're thinking, I'd like to try that, or try that trick, or try this?
Yeah, I was blown away. I mean, really, with Koco, it's so intricate. Like, I mean, when he was going in his records, he'd pull out 5 out of their sleeves and plop them down. So that's like the next 5 was a thing, a routine, that he did. So it's like he'd pull out 5 records at a time, plop them down, then boom, 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 switch them out, like, oh my gosh, like the amount of practice. Because I know I definitely don't practice as much off Twitch, as mainly I kind of use Twitch, to do that, just because it's a little free spirited or whatever. But I realize man, I could maybe challenge myself to that, but that just would require lots of practice.
And a lot of time. I know when we were down in Bristol, Lady Melzer ended up giving him a lift back to his hotel. And I think he was explaining that I think he was doing like 8 hours a day of practice. So that's like a full-time job, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
so if you didn't have to work, if you didn't have to do anything else and you
right.
had,
I would love it.
I still wouldn't get to that standard, but you know, if you had 8 hours a
Right.
day,
Yes, that's
yeah,
the dream, right? Like where this is my full-time job and so I must practice 8 hours a day, you know? I feel like that's where Coco's at for sure. I mean, he's getting booked all over the world. So
yeah,
this is his job.
yeah,
So it makes sense that he has these intricate battles planned out, you know, because I'm sure he's doing that 8 hours a day
yeah.
without question.
I love there's also a lot of humor in his sets as well,
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh,
and
he's
he
such
sort
a
of takes
showman.
himself seriously, but doesn't take himself seriously, you know, and
Right.
is very sort of humble.
So interesting to watch. On top of being a master technician, then he's a character, you know? He's dancing, he's, you know, smiling. I mean, yeah, he's great.
Last thing, and I forgot because I normally message my guests to tell them in advance, but I forgot. I always ask my guests to pick out 3 45s that sort of lift their spirits. Now, I'm hoping there's at least one or two or three that you can sort of name. So 45s that lift your spirits and make you, you know, uplifted, happy, or whatever.
Well, one of them that I dropped actually on my set, it's a King Most edit of the song Panties Most Def. And he didn't press that many of them. And we're fortunate enough to get one. But I just love it. Every time I hear that song, it's something about the melody. It's kind of housey. I love that one. It's a great edit. I'm really into like the house kind of funk thing right now, is making me feel really good to listen to. Actually, another one that I played in my set that I really love is A Go called For You. I love that one. It's got such a good bass line. Anything that kind of is really up tempo lifts my spirit. Anything that makes me want to dance is going to lift my spirits.
It's been great. You know, thank you so much. You know, we can probably do a part 2 in the future, maybe get Hydro
Yeah.
involved as well. It's been brilliant talking to you. What have
No,
you got
thank you
coming
for
up?
having me. So we have been doing our vinyl show every first Wednesday of the month. But because we're prepping for this Coco show, we didn't really like book anybody for this month. So we're skipping this month of April. But back in May, we're going to have our vinyl show the first Wednesday of May. My husband, DJ Hydro's Twitch channel. And then in real life, if you are in the LA area, we will be in Long Beach at the Common Room Roasters, which is a coffee spot. I don't know, Criztoz, if over there in the UK, this is like a thing, but it's kind of becoming a thing here in LA and other cities, is basically having like the club vibe at a coffee bar, you know, with like
Okay.
breakfast, you know, during from like 11 to 2 or 11 to 3, like in contrast to people who maybe don't want to go to the clubs anymore, but they still really want
Okay,
to hear
so go to a
DJs and
coffee
good
shop
music.
instead.
Yeah, it's a coffee shop and we're playing vinyl. It's all vinyl. It's really cool. It's a really cool vibe. You just go sip your delicious cappuccino and panini and listen to some DJs playing some really cool 45s.
That is interesting. Yeah, no, I haven't heard of. There's sort of restaurants or like small
Uh-huh.
places that have that. You know, we've DJed and stuff like that. But yeah, coffee, Graham.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. That
Yeah.
sounds interesting.
Well, thanks, chat. Thanks for hanging out.
Take it easy, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.